Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Haunting Hour episode review. This episode comes from season 1. It was directed by Terry Ingram, and it was written by Dan Angel, Billy Brown, and James Thorpe. And the episode in question is A Creature Was Stirring. Now, the reason why I wanted to cover this episode and another episode that I'm going to be covering is because it's the holiday season. And this year I've decided to tackle the Haunting Hour Christmas-themed episodes to get into the festivities. Now, this episode of Creature Was Stirring, I remember watching a handful of times way back in the day when this show came out on the Hub Network. I caught it later on because when I got into the Haunting Hour TV show, it was later in season 1, and I got hooked on it for like seasons 2 and 3 while I was in high school. So I DVR'd pretty much the entire show on reruns, and I had pretty much all the episodes at one point on there. And I watched this one a lot, and I'll say this, revisiting it after quite a long time, this episode still has a lot of charm, for the holiday season, and I can definitely see a hole that it was filling because the old Goosebumps show, and even the Nightmare Room show that had R.L. Stine's name attributed to it, did not have an outright Christmas-themed story adapted. And in a lot of ways, I can see a lot of what made Goosebumps work in this episode. And in a lot of ways, this does feel like Goosebumps. I think James Thorpe, Dan Angel, and Billy Brown understood what they were going for here. It does have its problems, though, I will say. And I'll get to that near the end of the review. But do I recommend this for the holiday season, for everyone to go try this episode out? Yeah, for a kids' horror show, this was fun. And I know there's a lot more Christmas horror in the kids' horror genre out there, probably better than this, but go give this a try. It's innocent enough, I would say. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the story starts off with this family of 5. There's a mom, dad, an older brother, a middle child who's a sister, and then a very young child named Timmy. And Timmy is the main character, which is kind of unorthodox for kids' horror because of how young Timmy is. I think he's around the age of 6 to 8, which is by no means average for kids' horror. The average age for these protagonists are normally around the age of 10 to 11, maybe pushing 12, 13, at the highest 14. So to see this young of a protagonist kind of shows, because off the bat, you're going to notice this about Timmy. He's a young kid actor, so they're trying to play on his cuteness to deliver his character, and a lot of Christmas cliches associated with that. Just keep that in mind. But it's Christmas morning, and the kids are dressed up in their PJs. They're getting ready to go downstairs and enjoy opening some gifts. But the parents are fighting, mainly over, them trying to have a good holiday, one last good holiday before they inevitably get a divorce, which they've been talking about. And that's pretty much what you're going to get off the bat. And Timmy and his siblings kind of notice their parents are starting to drift apart. They've been fighting a lot recently. And Timmy's that innocent kid that just wants to go down and count his presents under the tree, see what Santa brought him, and, have a good Christmas morning. So it comes time to open gifts. And Timmy's being very appreciative of how many gifts he got from his family, and he can't wait to open the one from Santa. And he has a specific wish that he had in mind with Santa Claus, which plays a role near the very end of the episode when you finally find out what it is. But essentially, Timmy's opening his presents, and his siblings are opening theirs. And the siblings, the older brother, he has this thing where he is given an iPod, but he asks for an iPad and makes a jerk out of himself and scolds his father for getting him the wrong thing. It runs him to his room in a hissy fit. Meanwhile, his sister, the middle child, gets a dress from her mother. And the girl's like, I'm not going to wear this. This looks like a dress my mom would buy me. And that upsets the mother. And then, of course, the parents get in an argument. about the dad trying to buy the love of the oldest child by buying him gadgets and making him, dejected from the rest of the family. And then the dad tries to scold the daughter after the mom walks off to go talk with the oldest child because he thinks that he's disrespecting her, she's disrespecting her by not wanting to wear the dress. So little Timmy is bummed out that even on Christmas, his family can't get along. And off the bat, you really realize that these two older siblings are very, very unlikable. Which leads into the purveyor of the rest of the story. So Timmy's like talking to himself and says, Santa, why couldn't you bring me what I wanted? And in a very brief glimpse, you see like this twinkle, this sparkle come out of thin air and fly into this box under the tree, and it starts to shake. And Timmy's like, oh, something's alive inside of this box. Santa must have brought me something. So he goes to open the box, and what's unleashed is kind of terrifying. It's pretty much like a Christmas imp. And this imp like squeals, he has wings, he has to like grayed skin. It looks creepy. I'm not gonna lie. I think the effects department pulled something off here with that. And this thing moves around like I think they probably used puppeteers to move it around, or maybe some animatronic technology. But it looks great. Nonetheless, this creature starts to fly around and wreak havoc inside the living room. And little Timmy's calling for his family to help him, but nobody's listening because everybody went upstairs in a fit of rage, kind of separated off. So the first instinct for him to do is to go ask his brother for help. And he goes into the room, and and his brother's being a jerk to him, and he's like, there's this creature downstairs, you got to help me. But the creature ends up in his brother's bed, and the two of them quickly realize that this thing is real, and they have to go get help. And the creature maybe spits acid on the brother's TV because, it's an imp. Plot armor powers the imp has. Destroys the brother's TV, which eliminates all need and necessity to avoid the younger brother. So the two head to the sister's room, and they're talking to the sister, and she's like, you guys are trying to scare me. And they're like, no, it's real. And they hear a noise in the closet and tell her, don't go in there and look. But she decides to go in there anyway and has an encounter with this imp thing, which has destroyed some clothing items in her closet. Now, this might be symbology to things that they are, interested in. Like the sister likes clothing, the brother likes technology. They have these things destroyed. That might play a role later on. So the kids freak out and they head into the hallway, trying to avoid the imp. And the imp, follows suit short after and starts wreaking havoc in the dad's papers and scatters them all over the hallway. This ruckus brings out the parents into the hallway, and the kids notice that there's divorce papers lying on the ground, and they, the sister apologizes to the brothers, and they have like this temporary bonding moment, and then the kids are asking, to the parents, are they getting divorced? And they don't really answer the question, but they realize that there's some noise downstairs and they need to go investigate it. And the kids tell them, okay, well, once you see what we have seen, we can all be on the same page, essentially. So the parents go downstairs. They hear a noise coming from the basement. They realize it's this imp thing. They freak out. They all run upstairs. They realize they have to get away from it because it has some sort of power to where, it can cause smoke from its acid and stuff. So they all decide to go hide up in the attic while the imp is left down in the kitchen. So while up in the attic, the family sits there in the cold, and they are, kind of talking and, reflecting over, what's been going on recently with the parents fighting and all that. And little Timmy is, pulls out a picture and shows it to them, and he says, hey, well, at least we have this. And it kind of reminds the family that they have each other and all this, corny Christmas cliche type of stuff. Meanwhile, downstairs, the imp decides to take a match, light it, and then, set the gas on the stove on and pretty much started a fire by blowing up the kitchen. like a gremlin would in the movie Gremlins. So the smoke starts to billow up to the attic. The family realizes that the house is on fire and they have to escape, and they manage to make it out of the house. Now, from this point of the story, while they're out on the lawn, they overlook the house being burnt down. The fire department's been called, and they may or may not come to a realization that, while all their possessions may be destroyed and all these gifts they received are no longer there, at least they have each other. And it tries to go this whole route where the parents might have fell back in love with each other, or maybe have agreed that this fighting they've had recently is something that they can look past, or something like that. And then you get a twist ending involving the imp, how the imp got to the house, and yeah, that's all. And you find out what Timmy's wish was, let's just say. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of this episode, A Creature Was Stirring. Now, off the bat, I will say this. For this being the immediate episode after Really You Part 1 and Part 2, the show's pilot episode, and in a lot of ways, I really think that the Don't Think About It movie that Dan Angel and Billy Brown made years prior to Really You was actually the real test pilot. But for this show, this episode preceded one of the most iconic ones. Kind of like how The Girl Who Cried Monster, and A Cuckoo Clock of Doom came after The Haunted Mask and the original Goosebumps show. This one is nowhere near as good as Really You from memory. But it is a very solid follow-up to that. One thing I can really dig about this episode, I've already brought it up, was the design of the Christmas imp. I appreciate what they were able to do with that. I like that that look and the mischievous factor to him, while it is a mild, or it might actually be an overt ripoff of the Gremlins from Steven Spielberg's film Gremlins. It was a fun character, and you don't really get any dialogue or personality from this thing, but the villain was fun. I dug it. I think for a Christmas-themed episode, it does, while it does harken on a lot of cliches, which is a negative I have with it, I do like the moral of the story. I think this one is more of a moral-driven tale, and that shines through it from the beginning. You have these various relationships in this family suffering due to, the older brother being dejected from the family because he's addicted to technology. The middle child, who's a girl, being stuck up and ungrateful because she's, bought into vanity and appearance to, her peers and to society. The parents are constantly fighting, so it puts their relationship stress in front of the needs of the kids, and also puts them at odds with each other, with them trying to compete with each other to win over one kid or another, and that's there. Then you have little Timmy, who's the innocence of the family, trying to just, he's the youngest and the most impressionable, but he's also the one with the most Christmas spirit, and notices that this is the time of year to be a family, and that's really what you get a sense that he wants in this episode. And the moral is to appreciate the time with your family in the holidays, and not the material gifts and all the itemly possessions that you can gain from Christmas. Quite literally, because it all goes up in smoke for them, but at least they have each other. That's pretty powerful for this tale. The Christmas atmosphere, you have a living room filled with Christmas decor. You got people dressed up. You got people dressed up in Christmas pajamas. For a small budget Christmas tale, set pretty much exclusively inside of a house the whole episode, it's very Christmassy. There's even snow. I forgot to bring that up. There's snow associated with this imp too. So you do get this wintry vibe. I don't know. There's something about it that, you can buy the moral. You can like and appreciate the look of the monster and what it's able to do. And you can get behind it with the moral and the atmosphere pretty well. However, there are some negatives with it. And I will say this. Timmy is not a bad character. He's just very clichély written. There's so many Christmas tales where you have a young kid trying to unite a broken family. I think the Home Alone movies themselves have done it 3 times. And this is pretty much playing on the same Christmas cliche. You got parents who are trying to get divorced, and then the youngest kid ends up doing some shenanigans or being involved in some shenanigans or makes some type of Christmas wish that brings the family back together, and they all appreciate what they have. That's little Timmy. And it does not help that his actor, because he's so young, and I'm not trying to knock him, I don't think he was ever in another Haunting Hour episode, but this kid cannot act. And you can clearly tell they were trying to prop up his cuteness to drive his main character. And in a lot of ways, I don't think there's another character in this show at this young of age being the main. And I can see that course correction probably being taken because of the experience they might have had here, trying to rely on the cuteness. It's not going to work for every story. It just so happens that they had a Christmas theme one. If they had any, it would be the time to do it. But it does not help that he's not a good actor either. I mean, he's fine for his age, but it could have been better in the acting department, if I'm being honest. The older siblings are unlikable, I think on purpose to prop up the likability of Timmy compared to the rest of his family. But I still have an issue with them because even after the story has wrapped up, I don't really feel a sense that they ever actually apologized to their parents, which they should have. They throughout the story, you get a sense that they understand what Timmy's saying and that they're growing closer. But even after the whole thing with the house catching on fire, they still mention, oh, my gadgets are on fire. Oh, my clothes are on fire. And they never actually apologize for their behavior, for acting like stuck-up brats on Christmas Day. I mean, this is the type of behavior that, trends on social media just because, kids come off ungrateful. And Timmy's older siblings are the definition of that. And I don't really feel like they came full circle. So that's annoying. The cliches themselves, the Christmas cliches themselves, okay? I'm going to be honest. I'm not a fan of Christmas horror and the kids' horror genre, if only because most of the time they rely on the Christmas cliches, especially the overtly Christmas ones. Very rarely do they actually subvert any tropes or at all. This one does nothing new with the Christmas cliches. Like I said, they borrow pretty much textbook ones used since the 80s and 90s here. And that's associated with Timmy's character, of course. But yeah, it's just kind of boring, and that really hurts the entertainment factor. I don't think constructively this episode is bad. I think every other actor was fine for the most part, like the parents. But it's just so bland because of that, because of the Christmas cliche aspect to it. So that is like an enjoyment negative. And then one small nitpick I have to kind of add on with the parent relationships, right? It said that they've been fighting recently, I guess leading up to the holidays, and they've had a few skirmishes that the kids have heard, them arguing. They've been talking about getting a divorce. But you don't really even feel the sense of believability that they've overcome that in the end either. Kind of like with the older siblings learning their lesson. You're like, okay, it's assumed that they're going to stay together, but, they never really had their own moment to connect. And their relationship was put front and center in the beginning of the story. So you would hope that you would get that moment near the end where they finally come together. But you get the sense, well, I guess they're going to stay together to just stay a family. Not that they're happy with each other or anything like that. It is what it is, right? That's not the focus they were going for, but it's kind of all over the place with that. And I feel like in the grand scheme of this episode, they're trying to throw so many cliches and, Hallmark movies at the wall. You got, parents being at odds, getting a divorce. You got little Timmy being the youngest kid, trying to be the spirit of Christmas. You got jerk older siblings to make little Timmy look better. And not everything was fleshed out the way it could have been. And then you get to the ending, which I don't think is bad by any means, but I can definitely see people who have a problem with the ending because of how vague it is. And it involves Santa Claus, I'll just say that. And I still can't wrap my head around if Santa did this in good spirit, or did he do this because he was being a villain? I mean, it's ambiguous for a reason, I feel. But even that is kind of mildly annoying. So yeah, all in all, you know, if I really wanted to keep beating it up, I could, about like the stale setting, you know, being stuck in the house the whole episode and all that. But for an episode being stuck in a house, this one still surprisingly had a lot of charm, right? Compared to something like Lots of Luck, where there was no reason why there should have been, you know, such a stale setting there. This one, I can understand more. This one, it's a short and sweet. You can put this on with your family. You don't have to watch this by yourself. Have a good time, get into the holiday spirit type of thing. It is kind of bland, especially if you watch a lot of Christmas media. This is, you know, just trying to be a very small scale version of Steven Spielberg's Gremlins, essentially. Does nothing new, but it's good for what it is. I think the moral to it is believable enough to put it here. But I just don't think it's very good because of the enjoyability of it. It's just very bland. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, I'm not going to give this thing higher than a 4, but I am going to give it between a 3.5 to a 3.9 out of 5 stars. And where I settled with this was on the higher end at a 3.9 out of 5 stars. And the reason why I gave it such a high C, gave it a C plus essentially, and not a very good, comes down to, you know, like I said, the moral really carries this. If it didn't execute that all that well, this would have been like a D tier episode. But what separates it from the B tier is doing something new and, you know, I guess bringing something different to the table with the Gremlins formula. This just didn't do anything new. I guess minus the twist, but even then, that's kind of tacked on. Even though there is setup and payoff to it, I kind of wish it leaned more into the twist to make it a little more darker, even though the ending is also kind of dark because the family loses everything. But that's beyond the point. You know, this is a good episode. It's recommendable enough, right? There's a lot of room for improvement. That's where I'm going to end this. This could have been way better than what it was, but it wasn't terrible at all. It's a good episode. And if you haven't seen it before in the Haunting Hour show or watched an episode from the Haunting Hour, this might be a good episode to start, especially if you're trying to start from the beginning. You know, there's so many great episodes from this series, and this one will give you a taste of what this was about. So yeah, that's my thoughts on A Creature Was Stirring. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.